process. So thank you, and we look.
It's a cold December in 2019. The location is the backyard of a house on 30 Main Street in Saugus, Massachusetts. The occasion, a groundbreaking ceremony where, with the toss of a shovel full of dirt, Saugus TV and the Historical Society of Saugus would officially live under one roof and mark the beginning of the construction of a new, state-of-the-art facility. But wait, how did we get to this point? What was the situation that brought together a public access TV station with a group dedicated to local history? The first part of this story begins with Saugus Community Television, or Saugus TV for short. Understanding the story of Saugus TV and its move to 30 Main Street means understanding the story of
Public access television. Through public access television, the community can take control, exchange important information, be
In a
creative.
nutshell, the concept of public access TV as we now know it began in the 1980s with the Cable Act of 1984, backed by Senator Barry Goldwater. The act said that if any cable company wanted to come into a town or city to do business, they could only do so if they carried the channels for local public, educational, and government use. The facilities, equipment, and training needed to run these channels would be paid for by the cable company from fees negotiated and charged by the city or town. The Cable Act also prevented these companies from trying to influence the content of these channels. So, from the creation of public access TV and the three channels that comprise it, came the creation of stations like Saugus TV. But that isn't necessarily the end of the story. Public access TV and the policies that created it continue to go through changes, even now. The same goes for Saugus TV. In 2007, the newly incorporated TV station went through a change of its own. That year, the station made its first move from its original location at Jackson Street, Saugus, to a new one that it was hoped would bring new possibilities and advantages. But, ironically, this new location came with disadvantages that would put the later move to 30 Main Street in motion. Saugus TV's executive director Brian Nadeau explains.
When I first came on as executive director of Saugus TV, or SCTV, we were located in the back of the old high school at 1 Pierce Memorial Drive. It was very hard to find. There was some signage on the walls, but a lot of people thought that those signages meant that that door below the sign was where we are. But we were actually all the way in the back, past the cafeteria, past the wood shops, past where the building maintenance people, their workshop was, all the way around the back alley, and then almost behind Savers, actually, is kind of a good way to say it. It was a lot easier to get to it from, what was the name of that street? From Davis Court. It was a lot closer to Davis Court than the highway or Main Street, to be honest with you. So a lot of people didn't really know where we were. We were there. I had started in 2013. And even when I had started in 2013, I was told not to put too much money into the infrastructure of that location because they were already planning on either demolishing the school and rebuilding or renovating the school in some fashion. So what I had done was we had updated any field equipment, any computers, any of the stuff that we could physically unplug and plug back in here. But as far as the studio and the control room, that had stayed a standard definition control room studio with fluorescent and halogen lights. It was pretty much kind of a makeshift studio from 2007 until we moved out. So it was very detrimental that we needed to get out of there anyway, regardless if there was something going on with the school.
Not too far from Saugus TV, another organization also found itself at a crossroads. Founded in 1928 with J. Thomas Radden as its first president, the Historical Society of Saugus was started at a time when many towns and cities were becoming more and more interested in local history. The society, however, had no permanent building to call its home, and as a result, tended to move around. The days of leapfrogging from place to place would finally come to an end in the late 1980s with the purchase of a house on 30 Main Street. But as with all things change. Change was coming for the Historical Society. Changes that would cause it to stop and think about its future at its current location. Laura Eisner, the Society's current president, explains.
Yeah, in the long history of the Saugus Historical Society, there have been many changes in the world that have led to variations in how historical societies are perceived, how many members they have, etc. And when this house was purchased, the society had a pretty good fundraiser in the Strawberry Festival, and as the years went by, heating costs rose, maintenance costs rose. We have had the roof redone 6 or 7 years ago, and other things that were very expensive. So in recent years, we've been beginning to think that possibly the Historical Society was going to have to sell this building, and looking at other real estate, there wasn't anything that was going to be significantly less expensive that would still allow us to have meetings in the building, still big enough to have a meeting room, in other words. And we looked at many ideas, including not heating the building in the winter, draining the pipes, but that's not very good for photographs and furniture and other artifacts that people have donated over the past. So putting it in storage was a possibility, but as you can imagine, storage costs, not only would it be not visible or usable by people, but also it would certainly drain what money was left after selling the building.
As these two organizations thought over their future plans, the local Saugus government had initiated plans of its own for the high school. In July of 2018, a groundbreaking ceremony was held to mark the start of construction of a new middle high school facility. The question now was, would Saugus TV have a home at this new school building as it did in the old one?
When the town voted to okay funds for the new project at the school, and then I believe the state chipped in a portion to build it too, and that's why it passed. The discussion on whether or not we would stay in that school seemed to have fallen by the wayside a little bit. I'm not sure exactly what happened. There was some meetings that we weren't a part of. There was some meetings that we were a part of. But ultimately it was decided that we were not going to be in the new facility and we needed to find a new home.
The door to a new studio based in the new middle high school, it seemed, was shut. But thanks to a relationship with a local landscaper, where one door closes, another one opens.
Al Donardo, who used to be a landscaper, would cut the lawn at the Historical Society pro bono for the town, for the Historical Society, and realized that this place was more of a storage facility than a place where people came in and out, and it wasn't used very often. And the lawn wasn't really used very often. So he thought, why don't we build right here?
Since Al was mowing the lawn, and he was the president of SCTV, when the new high school was built, and it left no room for the studio of cable television. They were looking around for a new location, and they needed to find it before the old high school was torn down. Several months before, in fact, because in searching they discovered that they were going to have to build onto any available property they looked at. And shortly before Al approached us, they had been looking at another property on the street, and the owner of that building said they'd not only have to pay for and build from scratch any addition that they needed, but also pay $3,000 a month in rent, which seemed like not a very good deal.
We looked at every possibility under the sun that we could think of, because we knew that that was a unique situation, being in the school, whereas we were rent-free at the school, and we didn't really pay utilities. However, the deal was, we would be there to help support all the schools, help support Ken Webb in his classes, and any of the other educational things that need to come up, which we did. I kind of exhausted all avenues, whether it was renting, leasing, buying, building on just an empty plot of land. I know that and a lot of, Joanne, my assistant, she helped facilitate a lot of these places, working with Sue Palumbo on our board to look for some rental or sale properties. We looked from one end of Route 1 to the other. I went all the way down to the old Four Eyes building over by Linfield. And then I went right over by the Malden border. There was talk about spuds one time, but just the rent alone was astronomical before we could even think about building. And that was the thing. We knew that we needed to build something out no matter where we went. It wasn't just put a desk and a computer in and away you go.
When Al said, I don't suppose there's any possibility that we could build onto the back of your garden, because your building, because I know exactly how big the lawn is, and it seems like having mowed the lawn that there's enough space there for adding on the studio that we'd need. And I thought that sounded like it might be the answer to both our problems. The Historical Society would still have space. It sounded like the addition and the studio that SCTV needed would be ideal for the Historical Society's public meetings. We don't charge for the general public. We don't limit it to members. And for several years, we've been having the cable film the program so that people who couldn't get out, who don't drive after dark, or who otherwise found it difficult to actually attend a meeting in person would still be able to see it on cable. And then there wouldn't be a need to cart all the equipment over to the meeting if we just move our visitors into their wing of the building.
A lot was at stake for Saugus TV and the Historical Society. Both organizations stood to gain from this plan if it was a success. But both also stood to lose if it fell through.
Coming into 30 Main Street with the Historical Society, the idea was it was not only us, Saugus TV, as a nonprofit, but the Historical Society as a nonprofit. Clearly, they weren't being used very often, and we saw this as an opportunity to try to breathe new life in the Historical Society because they were running out of money. This house definitely needed some repairs. It was run on oil tanks and very inefficient, so it was costing them an awful lot of money to heat the building for nobody.
The oil heat costs were rising. Difficulty of exchanging the oil heat for gas, which we wanted to do, but was going to cost money up front. The fact that the Strawberry Festival was not making as much money as maybe it did 10 years or so ago. People seem to be less inclined to go out to certain kinds of in-person events. Historical societies in general, unless they're supported by grant money or the town they're in. I had already been asking other historical societies how they managed to stay afloat, maintain members, etc. And in some towns, they had a continuous money flow from things other than membership, certainly, because we want to keep the membership charges down so that middle-class people can afford to join.
In doing this, we have pretty much saved and breathed new life into two nonprofits that serve the town. And if this partnership didn't happen, I would probably think that the Historical Society would have had to sell the property at some point.
If we sold the building, the resulting money that came from that would allow the society to go on for a number of years, but we'd be continuing to lose money very quickly with no hope after that of what happens in 10 years. Then the society would likely have to disband.
And who knows where Saugus TV would have ended up.
And so the game was on. From here on out, it was months of back and forth, of discussions between the two organizations, of meetings with local government, of draft upon draft upon draft of legal agreements being written. And after 2 years, the moment had finally arrived. Groundbreaking day.
I know, the ground's a little hard. It is December.
When the groundbreaking occurred, everybody felt very enthusiastic and optimistic that this was going to be a good partnership for both parties. I think that we all look forward to it. It seemed like a convenient location for cable, and very nice to have cable right in the same building because they could film events.
We were all, I think, pretty nervous because we didn't really understand exactly how it was going to come out. But we were all excited that we did finally have a location. A lease was signed. We were moving forward with the construction. Both boards were happy. It seemed that the town was happy. The selectmen showed up. The town manager showed up. So at least to me, it seemed like we were moving in the right direction after years of a lot of turmoil and uncertainties with the organization.
With that, the partnership was official and had hit the ground running. But on the road ahead was a bump the size of Mount Everest that neither organization, the town of Saugus, or even the world for that matter, saw coming.
The virus continues to spread.
With our mortality rate now higher.
COVID-19.
Coronavirus outbreak.
Finally, we did sign an agreement, and construction began, only to be slowed a bit by COVID, and of course, every activity everywhere in the country and most of the world changed drastically as a result of that.
It gummed up the works a lot. We didn't get our initial permit to build the foundation until mid-December of 2019. Pandemic hit March of 2020, so it was about 4 months later, 3 months into the major build. So basically we had a shell and COVID hit, and we weren't sure if they were still going to be able to work. We weren't sure if the school project was still going to work because we were under their deadline as well. The biggest issue dealing with COVID, the move and such, was the fact that the building over at the school continued to move at a rate where they were done at least earlier than they had told us before. Some say that we misunderstood or mistaken, but from what we understood, we were going to be moving in the summer of 2020, somewhere June or July, maybe August, because they said September is when everything would be done. We were told probably maybe the week before COVID, because we were still there, that, hey, yeah, you got to be out by April vacation because we're starting the removal of asbestos in your wing right after that. So now, instead of moving in June or July, we're now forced out second week of April. And like I said, this is only about a month into COVID. So, and I live in New Hampshire. It was tough to even come down because we're hearing, you can't travel over borders. People can't go to work. A lot of people, and we're being displaced as we're trying to keep the studio running, as well as packing up the studio for a potential move that is now coming earlier. So the COVID did not help one bit.
Well, I think every individual has their own story of how they managed to cope with COVID. Our last in-person meeting up to this point was on March 12th, I think it was. It was basically people were realizing that things were about to be shut down, and many people were afraid to go out, but there hadn't really been any ruling preventing in-person meetings at that point. So our last program in early March was a slideshow about Route 1. So we expected that to be an extremely popular program, but in fact, only a few people were able to come in person. Luckily, many more people were able to see it because cable filmed it.
The crew was able to continue working through the construction as long as they followed the guidelines. But the big thing that was happening was we were finding things were becoming increasingly unavailable due to the fact that, say, over in China, whatever factory was building, whatever it was that we were needing, had closed due to COVID. So we could not get that part or that item that we desperately needed to continue on with the job. Things were on back order. Things were just indefinitely unavailable. You couldn't even get phone calls to some of these people because they were closed. So that was increasingly difficult for the contractors that were working on this.
The number of reported cases of coronavirus in the United States has surged to more than 6,200.
Besides being a biological threat, COVID proved to be an economical threat as well. To slow the spread of COVID-19, a shutdown order was instituted. The town of Saugus and the world were at a literal standstill. While the order was meant to protect citizens, it also triggered a sort of mass extinction event for businesses that were unable to ride out the shutdown period. Both the Historical Society and Saugus TV were in a race to keep from suffering the same fate. With in-person activities out of the question, work from home and virtual conferences were the methods of choice to keep operations going.
We were technically deemed essential employees because we are media. So we needed to work. However, like I said, the governors were saying stay at home, don't go to work from home wherever possible. And then meetings started going from live at town hall and school admin or wherever to being Zoom. So we had to figure out how to get those Zoom meetings aired on our channels and out to the audience that normally would watch us for that program. Now they can go to the internet, but some people don't have internet. So not only are we dealing with the move, trying to keep things going, we had new objectives that we had to learn on the fly and to serve the need of the town.
A lot of our members, including board members, being somewhat elderly, felt that they weren't going to be able to navigate Zoom, or their computers were not good enough, or their grandchildren couldn't come over to show them how to press the right buttons. And we decided to have a few meetings on cable TV because we thought at least most people know how to watch TV. So that helped somewhat.
All our computers, all our workstations were at home during the pandemic. All the meetings were recorded, covered, aired. The programming never lacked. And during the actual changeover from 1 Pierce Memorial over to 30 Main, I think our channels were only down a total of about 45 minutes, which is almost unheard of. And the people that were here involved with it, the installers, the Comcast technicians, the fiber technicians, They were all amazed that I was able to coordinate everybody at the same time, and a lot of it was dumb luck and happenstance that everybody was available at the same time. But that's one of the things that I'm most proud of.
We also did have last fall some programs outdoors. Many places were shut down. We couldn't film at Breakout, for example, or even schedule a meeting there, a public meeting. And at the Saugus Ironworks, they were able to give us a permit to schedule a meeting, and we had several members sitting around a picnic table and with a few chairs set up for an outside, appropriately socially distant space. And we had Park Ranger Paul Kenworthy doing a presentation on the ironworks, and he was able to point out various buildings.
COVID had kind of taken the uncertainty where we don't know if we have a job or not, but also given us an excuse, hey, I've got to do this, I got to learn this so I can grow and so that I can stay relevant in this industry and so that people can still get their information across.
While both organizations pushed ahead, so did construction and interior renovations. Safely, of course. The results that followed were better than anyone had expected.
The garage was lifted so that it could be on the same level as the kitchen and is now a meeting room. At One Pierce Memorial, we had that huge conference table in one of the classrooms, and it literally took up probably more than a quarter of that room that we had 3 other employees' desks at, plus the storage closet. So it was pretty cramped, and I think one of the things we were looking at since we had the space was to kind of figure out who would take advantage of certain things at certain times, and realized a conference room that would be available to both nonprofits and available to anyone in town, kind of like the Brooks Room or the community room at the library. When we were in the high school, we had to share the bathroom with the school. Now we're sharing the bathroom with the Historical Society, and now there's a common area because they just happen to have a kitchen. We needed to update the kitchen anyway with the construction, so it was made so that in a way where we could shoot a cooking show. And boy, have we shot a cooking show, or 2 or 10, I think, at this point in about 6 months. It's a hit, and if I had known it was a hit, I would have outfitted that a little bit more with cameras and such, because we actually physically roll out cameras and some lights and the Field TriCaster Mini to do that production. But yeah, it's a hit. We've got people of all ages wanting to come in and cook, whether they're professional chefs or just doing it for fun. And of course, everybody just likes the atmosphere of the way the kitchen was done. It opened up the fireplace room, so there's a nice seating area for you to enjoy while we taping or pre-production, or just coming in to chat, which some people have. So obviously we needed some office space. One of the things, if you remember, we had these cubicle walls from, I believe, early 90s that were purchased for that space, and they were almost full walls but didn't quite go up to the ceiling. But none of those were going to fit or be conducive to this location, so we needed to figure out where our the 6 of us employees on staff, including myself, where we were all going to sit on a daily basis so that we can edit, answer phones, emails, and just perform our job. So there was enough space to do it was discussed to do a bullpen type atmosphere. It's more team oriented, and we can all shoot ideas off of one another instead of being closed off in each individual offices. So the studio, this was the main reason why we needed, it was hard to find a location because this studio needed to be specific. The studio that was actually built in the high school was sufficient, but to me it was inadequate. The ceiling was too low, and a lot of the programs you used to see shot out of that studio would have little blue lights on some of the shots, and it was literally because the lights were so low it was hitting the curvature of the lens just right, where we couldn't get rid of it unless we had to jury rig some sort of shade cover over. And it was just tough to do anything in there. So when it was time to come up with a new studio, knowing I hadn't put any money into that, it was time to make it the best that I could. We have robotic cameras this time instead of the standard human operated, just because a lot of times when people wanted to do a show, they didn't have anybody else to help them be their crew. And the more people you have on your crew, the better it is, the program's going to be, because everybody's working on that single job. So by having robotic cameras, it takes away 1 to 3 jobs that you need filled, where somebody in the control room can just do that. So I'm thrilled to do that. The lighting that we had in 1 Pierce Memorial Drive was kind of a mismatch of old lights that still worked from the beginning of cable to whatever was purchased in 2007 to whatever was donated from other studios that upgraded their lights before us. This time around, none of those lights were put in. Those were all recycled or saved for other projects. And it's now a full brand new lighting design that works for both green screen and just regular in-studio curtain productions, as well as being able to change the look of any of these productions by having every color in the rainbow available to shine on people. Before, you used to have these hot lights that you could only plug into one outlet at a time, or you're gonna blow the circuit. And if you wanted a color, you had to put this big piece of plastic film over it with clotheslines and hope that it's not close enough that it's gonna melt it and burn. We don't have to do that anymore. We got the LED lights. We can just dial it up with the lighting board. The full control room is amazing to me with our TriCaster, the full TC1. It's the full setup of our Founders Day setup that we purchased a few years ago. I think, when did we order that? I want to say 2017 or 18 maybe, because the Founders Day equipment was getting to be outdated and not working right. So when it came time to build the control room, we wanted to go with the same company since we were already familiar with it. And luckily that is also the same that has gone with the control room over at the new high school, so that any student that learns with Mr. Webb, or whoever the teacher may be in the future, they can just come right down here and know how to use both our Founders Day equipment, or field equipment I should say. I just keep on Founders Day equipment, but our field equipment setup, the TriCaster Mini, or our full TC1 TriCaster here in the studio, as well as the new TriCaster Mini that is being set up at the Belmonte. So in theory, what we have done is made it so that any student that learns can control any other production that goes on in town, whether it's done through the school, through the town, or through Saugus TV.
Having come through the shutdown in one piece, and with construction finally done, both organizations were now able to focus on the task at hand, getting back to business.
So everything's done, and I think it's been an amazing change. I think it's for both nonprofits. The Historical Society doesn't seem to be here as much as I thought they would be. However, it seems they are here more than they used to be. People have already started up new shows that none of us have even thought of before this happened. A lot of people didn't even want to come into the studio that we were at in 1 Pierce Memorial because it was old, because it was in the back of the school. A lot of them didn't even know we were there. Now being on Main Street with a nice sign that every single person that's stuck in traffic to and from all day long and all night long know that television is right here, and if just the word television on the sign makes people think, oh, I wonder if I can get involved. So I'm thrilled the fact that we have 3 or 4 new shows in the works.
We're hoping that we're going to be enjoying using the new gathering space, the new common area with its up-to-date kitchen. I have to say that up until this point, our kitchen was not used for very much beyond making coffee. And now we'll be able to heat up refreshments that people bring. We've always had refreshments at the meetings, so now this is going to be a little bit more elegant, somewhat more pleasant gathering space.
We now have the drive to do our own weekly show called What's on Saugus TV, What's Happening on Saugus TV. And that's just a little piece of showing the town what it is that we do here on a daily basis. Because a lot of times people can just drive by and think nothing's happening because we're in the back of the building again. Luckily, it's not so far in the back of the high school that you can't find us. It's just, we want to be out there. We found that people don't even know we have 3 channels. A lot of people think we only have 1, the government channel. I'm more interested now getting people onto channel 8, which is the public channel, and everybody giving out their ideas and their thoughts and maybe their hobbies, and get more of the familiar faces, where instead of saying, oh, there's that guy I saw on TV, I don't like him or her, I want people to go, hey, I saw her on TV, she's awesome, hi, you know, those kind of things. So I think that is a big change that has happened just in the 6 months that I've seen being in this location, working with the Historical Society.
Well, the building is very beautiful. I think that people in the short term certainly are going to be eager to come in and see what it looks like, what the space looks like. Some of them may have already seen some areas like the kitchen in the cooking shows on TV, but certainly people will be interested in walking around and seeing what the space feels like. We're hoping we'll be able to pull together some exhibits in the exhibit space soon, ready for those who come in person in the fall. And you know, I think it's a very exciting period, and we've made something that could have been disastrous into something very hopeful.